Do you remember when games used to be grungy?
I wish some poor sap would try and hit me. Just try it.
Or better yet, do you remember when all media used to be grungy?
You and I are gonna make a lot of money together.
I'm talking mountains of trash, decaying infrastructure, seedy nightclubs, abandoned buildings, and a vast criminal underworld hiding behind every dark alley. You saw this in a lot of movies from the 80s all the way up to the early 2000s or so. Stuff like Escape from New York, Dark City, Fight Club, Saw, and 100 other urban grime films were all the rage back in the day. And this trend eventually made its way into games as well. Titles like Max Payne, Condemned, Fear, and The Darkness are all peak grunge. But over time, these grimy city settings fell out of favor for a more sleek, futuristic look that permeates most of media. But as someone who grew up with all this neo-noir content, I feel like we're sorely lacking in it nowadays. I mean, just look at some of the sets from these movies and try to tell me you don't want to explore them in a game. Crawling through dingy subway tunnels and abandoned buildings like a diseased rat is exactly what video games were made for. And while there might not be much grunge content in AAA games lately, indies have really stepped up to the plate to carry on this fine tradition. So I decided to take a look at a couple upcoming indie games that truly capture that spirit of filth in the best way possible. I decided to start things off not in the future, but way back in the Prohibition era with a game called Fallen Aces. Fallen Aces is an upcoming first-person brawler with some light immersive sim elements mixed in. You play as the classic gumshoe archetype, punching your way through scores of mobsters, or should I call them goons. You know, it's kind of funny that the term goon is coming back to the mainstream with a completely different meaning than the one that the game is using. If you somehow don't know the modern usage of the word goon, you're probably better off continuing your life blissfully unaware. On the other hand, the old term referred to the classic henchman archetype. You know, the one that has absolutely no thoughts and only says things like, "Hey boss, we got a wise guy over here."
I don't know you. Get the hell out of here.
But what makes this word battle even better is that the devs are completely leaning into the absurdity of it all. If you take a look at their Twitter, you can see them making a ton of references to goons to try to reclaim the word in a completely ironic sense. While almost none of that is relevant to the game, I have to admire their commitment to the bit. If the guys at New Blood have their way, goons will one day return to the old meaning of henchmen that say, "Okay boss," and immediately get beat up.
Can't take this one fella, come on!
Getting back on track, the whole noir aesthetic going in this game is actually executed very well. It may not be immediately obvious from the footage, but this short demo feels very polished for an indie game. The combat is meaty, the voice acting is solid.
I don't know why the boss got me watching this stupid rooftop. I should be out there busting heads.
And the world looks like it's straight out of an old mobster movie. But what really stands out is a lot of the 2D work here. In fact, aside from the level geometry, almost everything in the game is 2D. Just like Doom and other classic FPS games, Fallen Aces makes great use of 2D sprite and animation work within a 3D world. It's a pretty unique aesthetic nowadays, and I have to give them props for hand-drawing tons of animations, even in this short demo. As for the downsides, I wouldn't say there was anything major from what I've seen so far. While the levels had a few different paths you could take, I felt like there wasn't that much incentive to explore in general. There was one single secret where I found a hidden Tommy gun, but other than that, I could have just walked down one linear path, punching everyone in my way, and I wouldn't have missed out on that much. Some more bits of lore, collectibles, upgrades, side quests, or anything of the sort would help encourage a bit more exploration. Overall, this one was looking pretty slick so far, so it's definitely worth keeping an eye on it for the future. Jumping from a medium budget indie straight to a micro budget indie, I decided to check out a demo for an upcoming game called Pigface. Of the bunch, this game has the most distilled form of that classic grunge right off the bat. You can easily draw parallels to Condemned or Max Payne just from the dirty, decaying, graffiti-covered warehouse that encompasses the demo. Not to mention the gritty themes of working as a contract killer for some nefarious criminal organization. The short TV messages with an ominous, deep voice guide are very reminiscent of the Saw series as well.
But I will tell you that you have a bomb collar around your neck.
But on the gameplay side, I'd liken this more to Hotline Miami than anything else. You're given a variety of weapons and told to clear out all enemies within a building. Simple and straight to the point. Now that I think about it, Hotline Miami would easily fall in the grunge category along with the rest of these games, because despite its flashy, neon-soaked exterior, it's still a deeply dirty game at its core, which just goes to show you that grunge isn't only a visual classification, but something that affects all aspects of a piece of media. Back to Pigface, despite this being a short demo, I think it has some solid potential to grow into another great entry in the genre. Based on some previews the developer has posted over on Twitter, future levels won't be just linear shoot-em-ups, but rather slightly more open-ended affairs. Something like you'd expect to see in the Hitman games, for instance, which sounds great to me. Moving on, we're returning to a slightly more popular indie title, that being the cyberpunk immersive sim, Peripeteia. Peripeteia. That doesn't sound right to me, but it's what Google says, so I'm going with it. Anyways, if you've been watching my channel for a while, you may remember me covering this video in a big ImSim roundup a while back. Given the theme of this video, I figured it was a perfect time to jump back in and give the latest demo a spin. And after playing this build, there's two things that immediately come to mind. Wow, this world is pretty cool. And wow, this game is pretty janky. Let me just set the stage for you. Imagine if Stalker took place in an Eastern European cyberpunk dystopia. Pepper in a bit of nihilist anime, slash down the budget to a small fraction of its predecessors, and you have a decent idea of where this is going. While a lot of the models, textures, and animations look kind of weird close up, seeing the massive, sprawling city from afar is pretty cool. And when I say massive, I mean it, because these are some of the biggest levels I've seen in any indie shooter, for better and worse. The sense of scale and everything is very cool to see, but that also means large portions of the world are devoid of basically anything. Vast swaths of the map are filled with various empty tunnels, hallways, and rooftops that don't lead to anywhere in particular. Maybe this is something they're planning to fill out as time goes on, or maybe they want to keep the huge open spaces to create a particular atmosphere. But right now, a lot of the world feels vaguely like an MMO game with all the NPCs removed. Sure, it's big, but there isn't that much to do with all the space aside from enjoying the scenery. Once you get down to the actual gameplay, you can definitely see the promise. It's clear they've put a lot of work into developing things like dynamic weapon attachments and the complex inventory system. And while I'm talking about cool features, I can't forget to mention the hacking minigame. Instead of some brain teaser like most games, Peripeteia encourages you to just mash your keyboard to figure out a password, which feels incredibly silly and pretty satisfying at the same time. Oh, and the music is pretty cool too. Cybersynths, ambient pads, and futuristic drum and bass abound. It's got a lot of promise, but it also has a very long way to go. I could easily see a game like this being stuck in development hell for the next 5 years or so, but at the same time, I think it does have a lot of cult classic potential. Up to this point, we've covered grunge from the past, the present, and the far future. But the future isn't set in stone, as they say, so let's check out one more futuristic game. The last game I played was called Parkside Decayed Soul Manipulation, which is quite a title. It's a little bit like Divine Cybermancy, which is yet another game I haven't played. Similarly to the others, you play as an assassin contracted against your will by some shadowy organization. This one is a little heavier on the immersive sim elements than any of the other games I covered. While you could go straight to the target and end the game, there's a whole city block for you to explore along the way. It's got all the classics too. Lockpicking, crawling through vents, climbing on rooftops, and a variety of NPCs all going about their day with different goals in mind. Now, I haven't personally played Cruelty Squad yet, so feel free to correct me on this, but this game feels like a slightly more immersive, slightly less absurdist take on Cruelty Squad. I'm just basing that on what I've seen online of both games, but I think there'll be a good amount of fan overlap between the two. Of the few games I played, this was by far the jankiest of the bunch. I could see bugs and sketchy interactions around every corner. But it's clear they've set some pretty lofty goals for themselves, so I'll be interested to see how they bring it all together in the end. Speaking of bringing it all together in the end, how about this video, huh? Like I mentioned before, all these games are just demos at various points in development. I might have seen rumors of Fallen Aces having some big announcements on the horizon, but I wouldn't expect any of these games to be coming out anytime soon. If any of them looked interesting to you, feel free to check them out on Steam or drop the developers a wish list. I'm sure they'd appreciate it. Likewise, if you want to see more videos like this, subscribing or just leaving a comment helps out a lot. I think I've made it pretty clear by now that I love the grungy aesthetic, so I'm always looking for more game suggestions in that category. One big one I didn't include in this video is DuskDev's upcoming game, Butcher's Creek, which is directly inspired by Condemned. Doesn't get much more grungy than that, huh? I skipped that one because there isn't a demo or a trailer or anything to talk about just yet, but I'll definitely be checking it out in the future. Anyways, this is your PSA to go watch Dark City if you haven't already. Okay, thanks, bye.
know why the boss got me watching this stupid rooftop. I should be out there busting heads. I wish some poor sap would try and hit me. Just try it.
You ain't so tough now, are ya?